So this is an evolving story that has more information being updated by the day at this point, and to kind of talk about where we started, MAPPA and Netflix announced an official partnership and deal where MAPPA anime will be exclusively on Netflix's platform, and the reason for this was because MAPPA in their own words stated that they wanted to focus on a global audience, global appeal, and you could take that however you want, good or bad, whatever, but more or less MAPPA said that they wanted to work with Netflix to be able to present their anime to a wider audience, which could lead to good and bad things in the future. Now that I've got that brief summary out of the way, there has been an update since then, a little bit more clarification from insiders within the anime industry talking about this entire situation. So let's read the title first. Anime studio partnerships with global giants like Netflix may spur reform of Japan's investor-centric production system, insider says. And this is who the insider is. Veteran Japanese TV producer Hiromichi Shizumi talks about the implications of MAPPA's new partnership with Netflix. This was posted today, as you can see. So if we scroll down, this is what the article says. Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen animation studio MAPPA recently announced a strategic partnership with Netflix, which the two companies plan to co-produce and distribute multiple upcoming anime projects. When the announcement was first made on January 21st, MAPPA's president, Manabu, said that Japanese animation studios now need to take the lead in all stages of anime production themselves, declaring the company's intent to become independent, according to veteran TV Asahi producer, forgive me for that one, Asahi producer Hiromichi Shizumi. The source is from Pinzuba News, which, opening it up, I'll show you real quick. It's from a Japanese news source, which I could probably do Google Translate here to actually showcase that. Let's see here. Yeah, you can see it talks about this and all that. I'll link this in the description as well if you guys want to read this article too. But back into this. So, moves like this could create pressure to rethink Japan's long-standing production committee system. This is a pretty big deal right here. I actually think that this is probably the biggest argument for this partnership with Netflix and MAPPA. Now, I'll talk about this in a second, because I know that sounds wild, me having that come out of my mouth after just how against I am of this partnership of Netflix and MAPPA. But I do think that there is something to consider here with what was said by this TV producer. Let's continue reading first before I elaborate. Becoming commonplace in the 90s, a production committee is a consortium of companies such as manga publishers, broadcasters, and marketers that have come together to invest in the production of anime on a project-by-project basis. While this system helps fund new titles and reduces the financial risk animation studios bear, it also somewhat notorious for not allowing the studios to make money. Now, more or less to kind of explain this, if you remember this One Punch Man situation we had last anime season, the reason why JC staff just had such a bad hand and why they were not able to just present a high-quality series is mostly in due in part thanks to the decisions at the top, aka the production committee, the investors, the broadcasters, the people that are funding the show, so to speak. They're the reason why the staff didn't have enough time and enough resources, and all the individual staffs that were chosen was because of the decisions at the top. And at the end of the day, it's very clear that that is a huge problem. This is a problem that has affected anime for decades upon decades. It's been a problem. Most anime that usually has production issues, not always, but about 95% of the time, maybe even higher than that, it's a higher percentage, potentially maybe 98, 99%, but most of the time, it is thanks to the production committee doing these weird schedulings and weird picks of studios or forced scheduling with other anime being thrown into the mix that forces these anime to flop, fail, and potentially be delayed at a very long period of time. It's thanks to these investors and people at the top. But then, the biggest damning thing about this whole situation is that these studios are not able to make money despite how good a product actually is, which I'll let the, article elaborate and talk more about this. As Shizumi puts it, investors allocate only the bare minimum to the anime studio, keeping production costs low. This means a base budget for the studio is secured even if the anime doesn't end up selling. This is a pretty big point right here. This pretty much more or less says that at the initial stages of the anime, they put the budget into it, and that's it. That's all they get, and you could look at that maybe as a positive or a negative thing, but the point of the matter is that they're given the bare minimum. There you go. There's your budget. Make an anime, and that's it. That's more or less what they're doing, and it's to secure financial loss. For instance, like if the anime flops, doesn't do so well, they're not going to really have to worry about losing much money because they already gave the bare minimum that they needed to for the production to begin with. So that's more or less what's going on here. It's to cover their own ass. But it also gives investors the opportunity to lap up most of the profits. This is is another big deal, which I'll continue reading this before I elaborate on that. And since there's no royalty system in place, like in book publishing, for example, the studio's cut remains the same no matter how big a hit the anime becomes. As a result, in this structure and other related factors like manpower shortage, there has been a rising number of studios going bankrupt. And I already made a video on this about a few months ago talking about this, that despite the anime boom and the demand for anime, a lot more studios within Japan are literally going bankrupt, and the reason for it is one of these reasons right here, which is about to be listed. And animators' wages have barely improved throughout the years. So this right here is a pretty big deal. So more or less, the studios that make this anime get the budget to work on this anime. When an anime is successful and does very well, like let's do an example here, obviously. Let's think of Solo Leveling. If an anime is very successful, the people in the studio that worked on the show are not getting much return, not enough investment and money back. It's mainly to the head honchos at the top. They get most of the money, probably 80 to 90% of the profits, maybe even more than that, and it more or less makes it to where the studio still is in the exact same state as they always were. They're at barely surviving, so to speak. The staff is barely surviving, and you accompany this with very high workload, hours that go beyond overwork to where you pass out at your desk, to low wages that's causing crash outs within the anime industry where animators are so burnt out they don't even want to be in the industry anymore, and which is why a lot of productions for different anime are being outsourced to, let's say, Korea or China to be worked on. It's thanks to these type of reasons, thanks to the production committee, how they've been handling funds, how they soak up the money, and how these studios have been left high and dry for a very long time to basically, oh, you have to eat the scraps that we throw down on the bottom of the dinner table, and that's what you get. That's more or less what is going on here. The other thing is there's no royalty system, which is a pretty big thing. That means that after the anime comes out, like once it officially airs, this studio is not gaining money, despite like sales after that. They kept their initial budget thanks to the production committee, and that is it. Which is why MAPPA wanting to become independent is such a big deal, and why it does offer a really good counter argument to why it's a positive thing that they do want to work with them to begin with. However, if Japanese studios skip the production committees and start signing directly with global streaming giants like MAPPA has with Netflix, Chibi believes production budgets will rise considerably. Creators naturally want to work where the pay is better and they have more freedom. Now, that's true not just for anime, but for dramas and variety shows as well. While he cautions that it's still not clear how far these kinds of partnerships can go in breaking apart the production committee, Chibi notes that if we start seeing a string of overwhelming hits, there may be growing pressure to rethink a system where only the investors profit. Now, this is a pretty big deal. More or less, this is kind of showcasing competition, that this production committee that has been stagnant in these controllers of anime for decades at a time, allowing anime to eventually reach the state it's currently in, are now going to potentially start feeling pressure from these rivaling companies like Netflix encroaching upon their territory, because Netflix is being used to circumvent the entire production pipeline, and MAPPA doesn't need to answer to the production committee. They answer to Netflix, or they answer to their own independent investments, so they are able to be an independent studio, which is exactly what KyoAni did a very long time ago. A lot of people might be unaware of this, but KyoAni, that like made, for instance, Violet Evergarden, Haruhi, and stuff, very well-known, beloved studio that makes cult classics. They are an excellent studio, probably one of the best studios in the industry in terms of just the workload and how they treat their employees. If you look up anything in terms of how people talk about animation studios to work for, you hear nothing negative about KyoAni in terms of just how the employees are treated. So the point here is that KyoAni managed to separate itself from that system a very long time ago, like a decade and a half, 2 decades ago, or whatever. I forget the exact timeline, forgive me on that one. But they did separate themselves from the production committee, which allowed them to become independent and have the higher rates for their animators that work for their studio. And in turn, this has caused their anime to really flourish and just look absolutely incredible. I think nobody's really, putting down KyoAni for just their quality of their work. So MAPPA wanting to do the exact same thing, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's kind of like a dream goal for a studio to be able to separate themselves from a parasitic system that is just sucking you dry and getting everything away from you, for you are not able to actually grow as a studio. And if I'm correct, I believe Chainsaw Man, once again, you can correct me in the comments below, fact check me or whatever, but I believe they fully funded Chainsaw Man, like Chainsaw Man Season 1 and the movie and stuff. I believe that MAPPA did not have any producer backing them. They fully funded that project all on their own, and that is why when they make profits, like for instance with the movie that came out recently, it's a pretty big deal for them. It allows them to make a lot more profits than they ever would with a high popular anime like Solo Leveling. For instance, I'm willing to bet you that Solo Leveling, despite the overwhelming popularity it's garnered in a very long time for an anime, I'm willing to bet you Chainsaw Man Rize probably got more profits for them because of to the studio. Like, if we're talking sheer volume of numbers, okay, like, obviously, Chainsaw Man, I think, made more numbers than Solo Leveling. I could be wrong. I don't have the number sheet here. But regardless of whoever sold more, the fact of the matter is that the money that the studio got from Chainsaw Man is a lot higher than whatever Solo Leveling was, even if it had higher numbers than Chainsaw Man sells and stuff, because it's mostly just going to the production committee. So it's a pretty big deal. Now, I do want to talk about something when it comes to budgets and stuff, higher budgets and higher rates. So just because something can get a higher budget doesn't necessarily mean that's a good thing. I'm looking at you, different movies from Hollywood. I mean, we got, budget failures, like box office failures right here that have absolutely bombed in the box office and all that. I mean, just because it has a high budget doesn't mean it's a good thing. But how much budget does an anime typically go for? Well, let's look at that for a second. So this is basically, if you type this in on Google, there's most likely going to be inaccuracies with this. I'm just going to say, so don't take this as the exact estimate. But the problem, or the point here is that anime more or less can be summarized as probably a $15 to maybe $20 million investment to make an anime. Like a 12 to 13 episode anime. That's a lot of money, yes, but when you factor in the budget of some of the highest budget movies in the industry for Hollywood, like reaching 490 million, millions of millions, like hundreds upon hundreds of millions here, a 20 million anime episode that has the runtime longer than one of these movies is not that bad. It really isn't. So, a higher budget definitely could help these employees a lot. The question is, will the employees see this money, and will the head honchos at the top not pocket it for themselves? That is the question. That is what we need to see, what is going to happen or not. But yeah, I wanted to bring this to people's attention. I thought that this was very interesting, just seeing some interesting good news, actually, about the deal. I still am very skeptic about the partnership, because obviously MAPPA has showed their obvious intent to cater towards a global audience, and I've already talked about this subject, so I'm not gonna get back into that, but I have my issues with the partnership. But if this partnership does lead to the production committee to reconsider what they've been doing for all these years, then it is a net positive. At the end of the day, this does benefit the anime industry, and this is actually the best thing that you could ask for, all things considered, despite the circumstances of what maybe issues it could also lead to down the road. But it's very vague. We don't know where it's going to go, but yeah, I just wanted to bring this to people's attention. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Chibi out.